which I guess for most of us we could consider to be the most uninteresting part of the Bible. Don't be disappointed. I hope it won't be that uninteresting. But nevertheless, I asked my friend David what he thought about the Vayikra and sacrifices. I said, what could be so interesting about sacrifices? And so his natural response is, well, that should be interesting because we don't know what it's all about. And no truer words were said. And so we are going to be discussing Vayikra, and to the disappointment maybe of many, the idea of Vayikra represents something entirely different than what we are even led to believe if we were just to read the portion of Leviticus, which is Vayikra, where the Bible is discussing the various sacrifices that were brought, supposedly, for the sake of God. And there was a period in history when sacrifices were brought by all different nations of the world. The Greeks would make sacrifices to the gods. All nations. And does it mean that the Jews were the same like all other nations, bringing karbonot, sacrifices to appease supposedly the wrath of God? And the answer is, it is the furthest from the truth to assume that which we read in the Bible literally is what the Bible really meant for us. Because Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai constantly reminds us that for those who treat the Torah, and read the Torah in a literal manner, are fools. And so it is strange that the Zohar, and that is certainly the way we shall begin our evening, by reading the actual Zohar, because we wish immediately to achieve another level of consciousness so that we can understand that which the Zohar will be presenting this evening, Rabbi Shimon, in another level of consciousness, so that which we are listening and reading and creating this evening will be understood on a far higher level of consciousness that is normally understood. The one, and certainly the best approach that I know to achieve a higher level of consciousness and a higher level of understanding is actually the reading of the Zohar. I go even so far as to say that those who can't even read Hebrew, those who can't even read the Aleph Bet, I would always and strongly urge you just to scan the words of the Zohar. Scanning itself can achieve an immediate connection to another level of consciousness, a higher level of consciousness. In Hebrew. Just scanned it in Hebrew, and for those of you who have not understood the process of scanning, I might make a suggestion that you visit your supermarket, and when you come to the counter, observe how they place the product code over a little scanner, right? You ever see that? And immediately there's a connection with the central computer and right back, and there you see the price of the item, all within a matter of seconds, not minutes, but seconds. So I have to assume that the mind of an individual maybe is not any better than a computer, than the scanner in the department store, because maybe we're not as equipped. But in any event, I have to assume that when we read something, we can also understand without knowing, because I don't think the computer really understands what he's reading. He's only been programmed that when he sees this kind of product code, he understands that this is what should come out. And therefore, Rabbi Shimon says, just the observation of reading the Zohar, not when I say reading, meaning with the eye, just scanning the words of the Zohar, we have made that connection. Therefore, we are going to read the actual Zohar, and hopefully we shall achieve an immediate elevation of consciousness. Parshat Vayikra. Rabbi Lazar Patach, Rabbi Lazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon, began. Sha'al lecha ot me'im Hashem Elokecha, ha'emek she'elah, o agbe lamala. This is a pasuk in Isaiah, Yeshayahu, chapter 7, and the verse is very small here, but I should get it. Verse 10. Ask thee a sign of the Lord, ask thee a sign. Ask it either in depth or in the height above. Now, for those of you who read the English, unfortunately, you'll be trapped with the corruption of the translation. Because ot doesn't mean sign. Ot, for those who still know a little Hebrew, I can't ever depend on Israelis to give me proper translation because they don't know what Hebrew is all about to begin with, other than it's a form of conversation. But what does it really mean? Ot means what it means. It's a letter. And therefore, Rabbi Shimon does not translate the word ot as a sign, but it means ot because there is never a word that is mentioned in the cosmic code, the code, the tzofim of the Torah, that does not mean exactly what is written. And therefore, when it says ot, he means just what he says. Letter. Letter. Ask of a letter. What do you mean, ask of a letter? Does a letter speak? Does a letter have an internal meaning? Well, we know already from the Sefer Yetzirah that a letter is what created everything around us. That is how powerful the Hebrew letters are. They are not merely a form of creating a language, but they are energy intelligences, powerful energy intelligences that we shall even discuss in greater detail when we shall come to the idea of korbanot, sacrifices. Ma bein dorot harishonim ledorot achronim. What is the difference between the previous generations and the later generations? Dorot harishonim, the previous generations, hayu yodim u'mistaklim b'chachma elyona, v'yodim litzaref ha'otiyot shenatnu leMoshe b'Sinai. The previous generations knew and could reflect upon the supernal chachma, supernal wisdom, and they knew how to combine letters that was given to Moshe on Mount Sinai. Va'afilu harishayim shebi Yisrael, kagon Achaz, like the king Achaz, even those who were evil, hayu yodim ba'otiyot chachma elyona, they too knew how to make use of the power of these letters. Therefore, Amar lo hanavi, therefore the Navi says, Sha'al lecha ot, ask of a letter. Mishum shekol ot va'ot shenimsera leMoshe, because every letter that was given to Moshe, hayta mitatret va'ola al rashem shel chayot elyonot hakdoshot. Because when you reflected on letters, these letters ascended and became crowns, which I shall shortly discuss, became crowns of the Chayot HaKadoshot. In the Zohar, there is a mention of Daled Chayot HaKodesh. There are 4 holy animals, but if I just translated that in English, it has no meaning. But in any event, the symbolization of the 4 Chayot HaKodesh, of these 4 supernal Chayot, is the lion, Aryeh, Shor, the ox, and Nesher, the eagle, and man. These are the 4 Chayot HaKodesh, and when you know the letters, you can connect to everything that is on a metaphysical level. The area which controls, when I say controls, I mean control, which controls every aspect and every movement of this universe. Everything. Tonight we want to ask, and because we are in the month of Shor, because we are in the month of Taurus, we shall discuss that aspect of Shor, because the Shor was brought as a korban, as a sacrifice too, and that will tie in for us an understanding of what Parshat Vayikra is all about. Because the Zohar seems to connect the letters to Parshat Vayikra. In fact, this is the Hagdama, this is his entrance that leads into an understanding of the sacrifices. So let us deal for a moment with the 4 Chayot HaKodesh. You have the lion. Now the lion is not a kosher animal. It is not a kosher animal. The shor is a kosher animal. In fact, of the 4 species, of the 4 energy intelligences, the only one is shor. Eagle is not a kosher animal. We shall also briefly discuss what do we mean by kosher or non-kosher. But in any event, shor is the only aspect that represents, quote, kosher. And certainly man, while maybe there are times even in some countries that man is used for food, but in the civilized world, it generally the aspect of food is left to the animal, and the only one is shor. Now we are in the month of Iyar. Iyar is the Hebrew month of Taurus, and according to the Sefer Yetzirah, the planet that rules over Taurus, that rules over Shor, is Noga, is Venus. Noga. What does Noga mean? What does Noga mean, planet Venus? Well, for those of you who know a little astrology, the planet Venus is a planet of love, the goddess of love. And it also rules over another sign, Maznayim. In other words, the planet Noga distributes its internal energy force to 2 signs of the zodiac, Taurus and Libra. Taurus and Libra. Now, while in conventional astrology books you find no reason why Venus should share and distribute its intelligence, its energy intelligence to these 2 signs, we tonight will understand why. But in any event, Shor, Taurus, is known to be somewhat connected with stubbornness. If you know, the state of Israel was created in what month? In the month of Taurus, Hayiyah, right? Some connection. Is it a connection with Israel? Is it by chance that it happened? The answer is, of course, there is a connection. It didn't happen by chance, because we say again that most people, I say most, I might have to say maybe 99% of people in the world are really existing in a robotic conscious state, meaning they think they're full of action, they think they're doing things on their own, but nevertheless they are being guided in a robotic manner. Very few people can make decisions that are really theirs. Even wearing clothes, as I've said many a time. Who decides what clothes we wear? Designer clothes. Who decides which automobile you buy? Who decides which house you buy? Not you. If you need the section, because this is what's demanded, that's where you move. Very few people decide where they will go, decide what they will wear. There was a time, maybe that a generation in the 60s decided to get rid of all of that and live what we would call a free way of living. But most people are guided in a robotic conscious way. Therefore, Taurus generally is, the shore, is considered to be one of an akshan, right? Very stubborn. Now, how does stubbornness connect with the shore? I mean, why is the shore, why is the ox chosen to represent this aspect of stubbornness? What does it mean the ox is stubborn? Well, we know that you don't mess with an ox, or a bull in a china shop is not the best place to put him.
What's the difference between an ox and a bull?
There is no difference, except I learned this when I once went to a rodeo show to ask that question. They told me the one is castrated and the other one is not. That's the only difference.
That's a steer.
What's that?
A steer is castrated.
They say a bull. Yeah. Well, I'm saying my information is only from a rodeo. So I'm not sure.
Does Parshat Vayikra always come out in Iyar?
Parshat Vayikra may not. No, not the Parshat, but Leviticus as a whole will always come out in Iyar. Always.
To me, if the ox is what is meant and it's a castrated bull, it has an entirely different meaning than it would be a bull. There would be no sex in it at all. There would be no sexual energy.
That's right. Therefore, it's sure. It's sure. That's right. It's not castrated.
Right, okay.
It's not castrated. No, it's fertile, and in fact, sure is the sign of fertility. All right. Another aspect of Noga, which one day, I hope in the very near future, we shall be discussing the aspect of circumcision, which unfortunately, again, is something really where so little is known of what circumcision is about. Most people accept it as just another precept, another mitzvah. However, from a Kabbalistic point of view, there is a very significant aspect in circumcision, insofar as the Zohar says a great deal of negativity, which is included within the foreskin, is literally removed. Now, there are four aspects, the Zohar tells us, in these four stages of extreme negativity, meaning negativity which rules over hatred, war, suffering, misery, everything that we can classify as an unhappy energy. Intelligence comes and stems from the aspect of what we call klipot. Now, the fourth klipa, strangely enough, is known by the name Noga. Noga, the same name that is given to the planet Venus, is also given to this membrane, small membrane, which is considered to be of the unclean or negative energy intelligence, and it is given the same name. Now that is very strange. Why would the planet of Venus assume a name of Noga? What does Noga mean? And why is it associated with this kind of left energy, negative intelligence? In Genesis 2, we learn about the Eitz Adat Tovara. In other words, the reason why a man has a right and a left hand, as you've learned previously, is because within us there is positivity and there is negativity. There is good and evil in all of us. Good and evil in all of us. In every planet there is good and evil. Every planet. And so when we pray on Rosh Chodesh, the reason we pray on Rosh Chodesh is to do the proper meditations so as not to be influenced by the negative influences of the planets and signs of the zodiac, and the Seder, with all of its meditation, permits us and provides us with an opportunity whereby this month will not be negative for us. That is what Rosh Chodesh is all about. It's not another celebration, not another mitzvah, but it is an opportunity that is given to us to control the negative aspects of the cosmos. That's what Rosh Chodesh is about, with the proper meditation. So, when we pray on Rosh Chodesh, we can eliminate from within our confines any negative energy intelligence that might be coming our way. You know, we take for granted that when you drive on the highway, that it's always going to be the other fellow who's going to be part of a statistic. There is much that we take for granted. But what reason is there that it's someone else and not me? On Rosh Chodesh, we can direct that kind of pattern. We can enter into a cassette which will create a security shield around us. That's what Rosh Chodesh is about. An opportunity by which when I'm on that highway, I will not be affected. I have a security shield. And wherever I am, wherever I drive, I will be protected. That is what Rosh Chodesh is about, with the proper meditation. Noga, it is 1 month that evil cannot be separated from good. Everything else, there are 2 parts to the tree of knowledge. Eitz Adat Tovara, good and evil. Man has a choice. Man has free will to choose good or evil. When it comes to Taurus, it's known as Noga. And the reason the Zohar says it is known as Noga, because Noga is a composite of energy that cannot be differentiated between good and evil. It is Noga, meaning it has good and evil. Its entire being is good and evil, just like that membrane in the circumcision. That means it's a very heavy negative month. And therefore, it is not by choice or chance that when we discuss the Holocaust of the Second Temple, the Holocaust of the Second Temple, we are told that 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva were inhumanely slaughtered. It is not by chance that much of destruction, serious destruction, that has befallen not only the Jew, because whenever the Jew is affected by Holocaust, it always drags in the non-Jew as well. It is not reserved for the Jew. You know, if we say 6 million Jews were destroyed during the Holocaust of World War II, let us also remember that 20 million non-Jews were caught up in this Holocaust. So it is not reserved. Maybe the Jews suffered it somewhat a little more inhumanely. It is during this period of Iyar, which is considered to be the most negative month, and That is the month of the establishment of the State of Israel. That is the month that the Zohar calls Chodesh Ziv, the month of light, the month of pure energy. What a contradiction, isn't it? How can you have such destruction and such Holocaust taking place at the same time in that period? And the Zohar goes on to answer, sure. Because the ox, and that's we asked the question, if you recall, why the ox is mentioned amongst the four Chayot HaKodesh for the four holy or supernal entities, energy intelligences. The only one that is kosher is shor. Now, what does kosher mean? What does kosher mean? If you've taken the beginner's course in the Machon, you already know that kosher does not mean something you're permitted to eat, and if it's not kosher, you're not permitted to eat. That is not what kosher means. What it does mean, in effect, when we discuss an animal as being kosher, we are discussing an animal which has two split hoof, and it also chews its cud. And so the Zohar explains, what does that mean? It means it contains the energy force of an atom. It contains three parts. It contains right and left, therefore the split hoof, and it also contains the segol, the third restriction, the aspect of restriction. What does it mean? It chews its cud. When the animal eats, it returns it. Not like man, who takes it in, devours it, and then there's only one other place where it goes out. But as opposed to an animal, like a shore, that eats and also immediately rejects the food and then re-chews it again and nourishes from that food. That is called the segol. That is called the segol. The three energy points, the segol, in Hebrew, you have the vowel segol, two dots, and the middle, which represents the power that we know to be the atom, proton, neutron, and electron. That is what kosher means. It means that if you eat that kind of an animal, you are eating an animal that has a circuitry of energy. Not a short circuit of energy, but a circuitry of energy, because it has the three energy intelligences, like in an atom, which consists of three energy intelligences. So does this animal called shor contain this kind of energy intelligence. When a person would bring a shor for a sacrifice, what was the purpose? What do you mean he sacrificed an animal? For God? The first thing the Zohar says, God doesn't need your sacrifices. I mean, if he had need for anything, that means he has lack. And we know that the Creator supposedly has no lack. So if we are bringing a sacrifice, we are bringing, in essence, something that is going to benefit us and not the Creator. There was never an intent by the Torah to indicate to us that God needs something from us. It is only a concealed Vayikra, Leviticus, that only teaches us that there are many ways by which we can temper the cosmos. We can temper the cosmos. The same way as we said that Rosh Chodesh for us is a method by which shield, I will not be affected. That's what this whole cosmic code is about, for my benefit. I don't want to leave anything to chance, that when I drive down that highway, I'm going to hope that I'm lucky. Or when I'm in an airplane, I hope that I'll be lucky. To leave something to chance. No, we have a system by which we can guarantee the next month's activities that pertain to us. But you have to know how. You have to know how. The shore, and that's why Taurus is a very heavy month, and it also must be a very negative month. And that's why shore, those who are born under the sign of Taurus, are usually people who despise movement. Give them their place. Don't ever move them. If you move them, it's traumatic. It's traumatic. But the moment they're moved somewhere else, as long as you don't move them, immediately, they are self-satisfied. They're very funny people. They are the funniest people of all signs. They can have.
Gentleman has a question.
Yes. All right.
It must be a Taurus.
Do you have a question from the Taurus?
That was a statement, not a question.
No, she has a question. I have a question. Go ahead. He said, I'll wait.
Okay. I just want to finish this thought. Now I'll open it up to questions. The Taurus, the shore, contains the aspect not of Tovara that can be separated, but for every benefit that shore will have, along with that comes the responsibility that it must go through a spiritual, unfortunately, whether the Taurus is aware of it or not, but at the same time, he must experience negativity because it is called Chodesh Ziv. It is the month by which light is drawn down to that individual and, of course, to the world, if we can know how to attach and connect with Shor. How did these things come about? How did Noga, Venus, encapsulate? Meaning, it is an embodiment of that kind of energy. Why Shor? Does it have that embodiment of that kind of energy? If you have a question. No.
So I have questions, but go ahead, I can wait.
You can wait, okay. But you could ask one question if you want.
From the Pashtus point of view, I can understand the term of the Chumash, Isha Reich Nechoech L'Hashem. The Pashtus. How would you explain this from the...
I wouldn't understand it. The Pashtut meaning, from its literal sense, that this is a good savior. When you bring a sacrifice to the Lord, there is a good savior, and that God appreciates it.
Okay.
That's right.
No, I can explain it though as an anthropomorphic presentation, just as there are other anthropomorphic statements in the Torah. So this would be from the Pashtus, from this
Right.
general sense. But how would you explain this from?
If I would direct myself just to as concise and as an answer as I can give, just to give you the answer, it says to God. But we know that there is no such thing as God. You mean it's a man? It's a woman, maybe? No, it's not a woman, because God is always referred to as male, right? Chauvinistic. The Bible is chauvinistic. We understand that that word to God means the tetragrammaton. That means that we wish to contract and we wish to connect with the greatest force, the greatest channel of energy. That Moshe, when he wished to slay the Egyptian, made use of the letters of the tetragrammaton. Merely by looking and uttering those letters, he smote the Egyptian. Did not use any physical force. So, when we are discussing it, I'm going ahead maybe of what I wanted to say tonight, and that is I'm saying it now. The reason for sacrifices in general is not, and has never been, to create a satisfaction or a good savior, reich nichoach l'Hashem, so God can appreciate what we're doing. It has absolutely, according to the Zohar, and unequivocally anything to do with the idea and concept that we are creating a sacrifice for God, but rather we are making connections with the cosmos, making use of the Tetragrammaton, which in that case would be La Yud K Vav K. And how do we make those connections? How did the procedure with the Kohen and with this individual, how does he connect? So he brought a sacrifice, therefore he connects. I mean, you're talking about an animal. What brain does an animal have? What power does an animal have? That we are going to benefit somehow from bringing this animal, slaughtering. And if you're part of the ASPCA movement, you're violently opposed to the entire concept of taking animals and destroying them. Okay, so we will say we will ritually slaughter these animals. But in essence, you're destroying an animal. How? How in good conscience would God want us to go through this kind of procedure of sacrifice? And incidentally, this has turned many people off the Bible to begin with. Shemot is beautiful. Exodus, oh, what a beautiful story. Genesis, oh, what a beautiful story. Leviticus, let's skip that one and go right on to Numbers. When you come to Numbers, it even gets worse. I mean, it gets so bad that if you want to look at the commentaries on Numbers, you know, there's just a couple of lines on each page. There's so little, except when you get to the real juicy parts of, you know, where the Parsha just before, you know, with Korach, and that's an interesting story. How there was an earthquake and swallowed up people, or where Zimri and the non-Jews and non-Jewish got together and publicly created a sex act. For those interested in the sex story, I guess it would be interesting Numbers. But other than those few stories, counting Jews, and as we will shortly discuss, going with a flag, I mean, we're talking about a powerful document, or are we talking about a storytelling book? And the answer is, according to the Zohar, that for anyone who will ever treat the 5 books of Moses as relating to narrations and tales is a fool. I would not dare make that kind of comment.
The letters of Pshat is Tipesh.
Well, that is if that is what is meant by Pshat. But of course, we know that Pshat, the word Pshat in Hebrew, has many meanings. It has a meaning of litpashet, to get undressed. Are you referring to how does the word become undressed? Like a person? You didn't mean that. Did you mean, if you know Hebrew, and I assume you do, you know, litpashet, you expand. Which is it? Expansion, getting undressed, simple. It gets a little confusing. But from a Kabbalistic point of view, there is no confusion in the Bible if you know the code and you know how to decipher the code. The word pshat means undressed. It becomes...
That is exactly what I was referring to. Most people do not study the Chumash in the form that you are presenting it, and they are learning it plain Chumash and Rashi.
Right.
Rashi is pshat.
Oh, Rashi was, if he was by far, I could never regret, I would not.
He was probably one of the most profound Kabbalistic people.
That is correct. And therefore, we could not treat Rashi and learn Rashi on the basis of what he says. Makes no sense. But yet, he was a Kabbalist, and therefore, if you can approach the commentary of Rashi on the Bible from a Kabbalistic approach, oh, it becomes beautiful. In any event, what we are saying now is that sure, this animal represents for us now something more than merely the sacrificial animal for the sake of God, but rather we are going to make an effort to take this animal, connect with its internal energies, and turn it around and create a security shield for us. That is what shor means. That is what the purpose of sacrifices were. It was for our benefit. Now, the Sefer Yetzirah tells us that what created that massive planet that, according to astrophysicists, we shall never learn what Venus is about. There have been many expeditions to determine what is Venus about, and because it is so concealed, there is almost no chance that we shall ever find out what exists on Venus. However, the master Kabbalist, Shabtai Dunlow, tells us exactly what Venus is about. He had his own spacecraft, knew how to fly to Venus, and come back with all the information. Exactly what takes place on Venus. What was his space capsule? Was there such a thing as a space capsule? We know from, if you've read the Star Connection, you know that Elijah left this planet via a spacecraft. You know that even Moshe did not die, according to the Zohar, although it seems to appear from the Bible that he did. But the Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who studied with Moshe because Moshe returned on his own personal spacecraft back to this earth and studied with him, as did Elijah the prophet. Both of them did not die. Both of them were seen leaving in a spacecraft. How did Shabtai Dunlow do it? He tells us that his spacecraft, according to Avraham Avinu, Abraham the patriarch, that through the letter Pei, Venus was created. Can you imagine? A little Hebrew letter like Pei created this vast expanse of Venus? Yes. You'll ask, how could that be? How could that be? This little letter. But once we can understand that from a little DNA that is unobservable by the naked eye, yet can produce an individual. It's a coded message, very small, and this coded message contains everything in code, and contains not only the code, but contains the energy intelligence that this little sperm carrying the DNA is going to produce what? A person. That is understandable. From a little sperm, from a little egg comes a man. That is understandable. But we cannot understand how the letter Pei could create Venus. Well, I subscribe to Shabtai Dunlow that the letter Pei, as Avraham Avinu said, created the planet Venus. And therefore, when he studied what there was to study about the letter Pei, he understood precisely what goes on in Venus, understood precisely what the energy intelligence of Venus is all about. And we know, as science knows today, that if I could control that DNA, and within that DNA they can suspect that maybe there is a flaw in the DNA which will produce an impairment in that coming human being, they said that would be beautiful. They can operate. That's genetic engineering, a new science. Genetic engineering. The only reason there is genetic engineering, because they know very little about it, is at least to tell us here this evening that when Shabtai Dunlow said that if you can master that Pei, you can master Venus. You can master every energy intelligence that emanates from Venus. And the same way is the idea of Shor. Shor contains not everything we've discussed yet. There is still more to discuss about Shor. But how can I control? How can I control Shor? Again, we refer to the Sefer Yetzirah, the Book of Formation, written by Avraham, the patriarch, who says that the letter Vav created the month of Iyar, created the Shor. Do you imagine a little letter? But we're not surprised anymore how a little letter can create an ox. No problem. And if I can make use of that Vav, and I know what that Vav is all about, I then can master the energy intelligence of the sign of zodiac, which is Taurus, which is Shor. And because Shor is one of those Chayot HaKodesh, it is one of the highest forms, and the reason it is one of the highest forms, because in that level of consciousness, Shor, according to the Zohar, is considered to be left column. Now, what does left column mean? It is the equivalent of the electron of an atom. That's Shor. That's Shor. That's a secret. You think that Shor is just another animal. Along comes the Torah and says, no. That Shor contains certain energy intelligences more powerful than the atom itself. You want to control it? Along comes the business with sacrifices. What does it mean, sacrifice? The word in Hebrew, for those who know a little Hebrew but never associated the word korban, sacrifice, what a mistake, a corruption. Are you from Israel? What does krav mean? War? How do you associate war with sacrifice? Who are you fighting?
But it's also karov.
What? And also karov. So how do you get sacrifices? Being close, and it's war. How do you associate sacrifice? And therefore sacrifice is an absolute corruption. It was not a korban LaShem. It was a korban, getting close to the Yud Kei Vav Kei. That's right. That's right. And using the Yud Kei Vav Kei to do an act of war against what? The negative energy intelligences that must and does rule each and every single month. So when we're discussing the Parsha Vayikra or Leviticus, we're talking about something entirely different. We're not talking about Jews as well as non-Jews, because we know that on Sukkot, non-Jews brought karbanot too. What did they want to do? Appease God? No. They were also given this opportunity to connect to certain energy intelligences, because a shore is that energy intelligence. It's left column. It's negative. And only because it is negative does it have that potential of drawing down the light, drawing down energy. We know that what is the difference between the Jew and the non-Jew? What is the difference? Desire to receive. The Schwitzer. You ever see a non-Jew? What a pleasure to sit in his company. No schwitzes, he's calm. You know, he's not excitable. He's like almost a stone wall, right? Beautiful. Why? Because he does not have that degree of negative energy intelligence. The Jew has that kind of negative energy intelligence, and if you want to know why, and in no other month could there be Hakamat HaMedina, because we are ruled by Shor. We are ruled by Shor. We are ruled by this intense energy intelligence. And so when the Shor was brought for a korban, it wasn't a sacrifice for God. It was making use of a letter the Vav, making use of the letter of the Tetragrammaton to connect and draw and tap that kind of energy that Shor represents as a channel of energy.
Rav, are we therefore trying to destroy the negative influence, which is Shor, which Shor represents or connects with? Okay.
Right.
If that's the case, are all the four animals negative? Are they all electrons?
No,
So
only Shor.
Right. So
Only
therefore,
Shor.
why would we sacrifice an animal which would be the positive or the neutral at other times? That's my question.
We can't bring an Aryeh, a lion, because a lion is not kosher. It is not brought. It is only Shor that we discussed that is going to be brought, supposedly, to use the corrupted word, for a sacrifice, right?
So only Shor could be used
Only
for the
Shor
four animals.
of the four animals.
And what about the other animals being sacrificed?
Now, we'll come to that. There are other animals that are brought, right? But we are discussing Shor.
Man is also an animal?
Man is not an animal, or is an animal, because he's included in the four Chayot HaKodesh. Now, just to give you a brief description of the way the Zohar analyzes these four concepts, the Aryeh, the lion, Leo, is right column, the sharing concept. Shor is considered the negative. In other words, Aryeh would be the equivalent of the proton in an atom. Shor would be the equivalent of an electron. Nesher, the eagle, is the central column. The dot and the segol. And man is the recipient of all of this. But he is the recipient and also the determinator. He is also the determinator. Because also in this, we will go through it, in this Parsha, when we want to discuss Genesis, Bereshit, you find that there are two Genesis. There are two creations. There is one creation of the first 7 days, because it says, Zachar unekeva baraotam, and it says, Naseh Adam b'salmenu v'kidmutenu. It means that in the first 7 days, man was already created. And if you know a little of your Chumash, you know that after the 7 days, we have a new story about Adam Arishon, that God took together from the dust of the earth and created man, Adam, and then it tells us another story. He took a rib out of Adam Arishon and created a woman. But yet in the first day, in the sixth day of creation, we are told that Zachar unekeva barotam. He already created male and female. In the sixth day of creation, what's this whole story about? Afterwards, after the 7 days, tells us a new story. Who's that? Is that Adam or is that somebody else?
Maybe refer to the animals, Zachar unekeva.
Maybe it was.
No, the sixth day he says, let's make man in the image.
In a metaphysical way.
Right. That is correct. That's right. That's right. The first 6-7 days are referring to pure energy intelligences. What we call in the morning in our sessions, the reality, the 99% of reality. See, because the scientist tells us that you think you're all looking at me now, you're making a mistake. I'm not even here. That's what they say. See this chair? As long as I don't see that chair, it doesn't exist. Only what you see becomes it and falls into a form of existence, but illusion. But illusion, because everything is uncertainty. Is there a world of reality? The answer is yes. There is a world of reality. The 7 days of creation, called Genesis 1, deals with the world of reality. Then, after the 7 days, we deal with Genesis 2, which deals with the world of illusion. That world of Esadat Tovara, good and bad. What's good for one is bad for another. So what's good and what's bad? Therefore, when we are discussing Shor, we are not even discussing the physical reality of Shor, but we are discussing this physical reality which is an embodiment, encapsulates something more deeper, something more real than this physical animal. This animal from the cosmic code of the Torah. And only from the Torah do I understand that this shore encapsulates a power called Ziv, pure energy. Only the shore. Because Aryeh, while he may be the master of the jungle, does not encapsulate what the shore does. The shore is a physical reality that has pure energy intelligence included within its composite. And therefore, when the Torah says, bring shore, and it is not by any coincidence that the Egel Azav, which is also shore, was used by Yunus V'Yumbrus, as the Zohar says, to create Egel Azav. Do you know it was a living being, but it was only made from gold. They had the power to instill, to capture this power of the animal and transform it into a physical piece of gold and made it into life. You've heard of The Alchemist?
There's a movie on it very recently.
Yes. Now we'll become respected citizens and we have credibility. I always said, as long as there's a movie called, the Ten Commandments, right? So I can now say that the splitting of the Red Sea was absolutely an illusion. Does that mean I don't believe in what the Torah says? The Torah is not talking about splitting the Red Sea because there are so many contradictions in the story we've discussed that when we discussed the splitting of the Red Sea. And if you go to Universal Studios, I assure you, you will see how it's done. It's a complete illusion. So what is the Torah dealing with? Illusions? Dealing with oxes? Is that what this great document on Revelation was about? No, when they took, and that's how Shlomo HaMelech got gold. There's gold in Israel. There is gold in Israel, but you'll never find it unless you deal with the 99% of reality and you can make gold yourself, as Shlomo HaMelech made gold. Because the potential energy intelligences of creating everything into gold, into every physical reality, is only in Israel. That power, that's why the ark belongs in Israel. That's why it's still there. It was never removed. Despite the movie of Spielberg, right? Looking for the Raiders of the Lost Ark, right? Are we okay? We'll have a couple of minutes break. There's for refreshments. We'll come back to it.
Sacrifice also